You think you know the story of Sleeping Beauty. You see her in your mind's eye, the serene princess, her hand resting delicately on her chest, her lips parted in a century of silent slumber. You see the castle, choked with thorns and briars, a fortress of time itself, and you see the prince, brave and virtuous, hacking his way through the cursed forest to deliver the single magical solution: true love's kiss. It is perhaps the most iconic romance in the Western canon, a story of patience, destiny, and the gentle, restorative power of love. It's the story Disney sold you, it's the story the picture books gave you, it's the story you were told at bedtime, and it is a profound, deliberate, and calculated lie. The narrative you have been fed is a confection, a sugary gloss painted over a truth so brutal, so steeped in violence and human cruelty, that it had to be systematically buried. The original story is not a romance, it is a horror story. It is not about a chaste kiss, it is about sexual assault. It is not about a wicked fairy, it is about a cannibalistic queen. It is not about a passive princess waiting for her destiny. It is about a woman enduring unspeakable trauma and the terrifying, violent world of men. The real story of Sleeping Beauty is not a fairy tale. It is a crime scene preserved in the amber of folklore. Once you understand that the iconic sleep was not a magical trance but a euphemism for a state of utter vulnerability, you will realize that the awakening was not a moment of romantic salvation, but the beginning of a second, more terrifying nightmare. Once you understand that the villain was not a sorceress with a grudge, but a human wife with a crown, a motive, and a royal chef under her command, you will see the story for what it is: a coded message about the real dangers that stalked women in the corridors of power. To find this truth, we must leave the sanitized, family-friendly world of the brothers Grimm and Charles Perrault. We must travel back further to a darker, more cynical time. We must go to 17th century Naples, a city of Baroque splendor and breathtaking squalor, a place where life was cheap and power was absolute. Imagine it. The air is thick with the smell of incense, sewage and wood smoke. In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, palaces of staggering wealth stand beside tenements teeming with the desperate and the starving. This is a world of soldiers, courtiers, poets, and assassins, and it is the world of a man named Jambatista Basil. Basil was no gentle storyteller scribbling for children. He was a courtier, a governor, and a soldier who had seen the raw, unvarnished ugliness of his time. In 1634, he published a collection of stories titled Lo Conto dei Liconti, the Tale of Tales, later known as the Pentamerone. He wasn't inventing these stories. He was recording them, capturing the grim, bloody, and often obscene tales that were told in the barracks, the taverns, and the courts of Italy. And within this collection lies the first comprehensive literary version of our story. It is not called Sleeping Beauty. It is called Sol, Luna, Italia, Sun, Moon, and Talia. And the story it tells will curdle your blood. Basil's version begins, as many do, with the birth of a princess named Talia. Great lords and wise men are summoned to her father's castle to predict her future. They cast her horoscope and declare that a great peril awaits her, a peril involving a splinter of flax. The king, her father, in a futile attempt to outrun fate, bans all flax, hemp, or any similar material from the castle. It is the first sign of a classic theme, the powerlessness of even kings in the face of destiny. But destiny, in these old tales, is not a gentle guide. It is a predator. One day, the now-grown Talia sees an old woman spinning with a spindle and distaff outside a window. She has never seen such a thing. Her curiosity, a trait so often punished in female characters in folklore, gets the better of her. She invites the old woman up. takes the distaff to try it for herself, and immediately, a tiny splinter of flax drives itself deep beneath her fingernail. She falls to the ground as if dead. Her father, the king, is consumed by a grief so vast he cannot bear the thought of burying his beautiful daughter. He has heard the prophecy, he has seen its fulfillment, and he rejects the finality of the grave. So, instead of a tomb, he places Talia's body in one of his remote country estates. He lays her upon a velvet throne in a room filled with opulent silks and brocades, and then he abandons her. He locks the doors, leaves the palace to its slow decay, and commands that no one ever speak her name again. He entombs her not in the earth, but in a forgotten palace, a monument to his grief and failure. This is where the story you know would introduce the 100-year slumber and the encroaching thorns. But Basil's tale has no time for such gentle metaphors. His story is far more direct and far more horrifying. Time passes, not a century, just time. One day, a different king, not a prince, but a ruling monarch, a man of power and appetite, is out hunting. A falcon escapes his wrist and flies through a window of the remote, dilapidated palace. The king, annoyed at losing his prize bird, orders his retinue to find a way in. They find the doors sealed. They force their way inside. The king enters alone, walking through silent, dust-choked halls. He calls out, but no one answers. He moves from room to room until he finds the one where Talia sits, motionless on her throne, lost in her death-like sleep. Basil writes that the king was amazed by her beauty. He calls to her, he touches her, he shakes her, but she does not stir. Her coma is absolute. And here, the story takes its first truly sickening turn. This is the moment that Perrault and the Grimms would later erase, the act they would replace with a chaste and magical kiss. The king, Basil tells us with chilling directness, was inflamed with lust. Seeing her unresponsive, utterly helpless, he does not see a tragedy. He sees an opportunity. He lifts her from the throne, carries her to a bed, and, as Basil's stark prose puts it, he gathered the first fruits of love. Let there be no ambiguity. This is not a metaphor. This is not a romantic encounter. The hero of this story does not awaken the princess with a kiss. He finds her in a coma and he rapes her. Then, his desire sated, he leaves her there, still unconscious on the bed, and returns to his own kingdom, to his own life. He is a king, after all. He has things to do. For a time, he completely forgets about the silent girl in the abandoned palace. His crime is a footnote in his day, but consequences have a life of their own. 9 months pass. Talia, still lost in her unassailable slumber, gives birth. She is still unconscious, a living vessel, her body performing the functions of life without any command from her mind. She gives birth to twins, a boy and a girl. 2 beautiful infants now lie beside their catatonic mother, cared for by no one, yet miraculously, they survive. Basil introduces a touch of the magical here, explaining that fairies, drawn to the scene, place the infants at their mother's breast. They feed from a mother who does not know they exist. The awakening, when it comes, is not romantic, it is biological, accidental, and grim. One of the infants, searching for its mother's breast, instead takes her finger into its mouth. It begins to suckle, and in doing so, its tiny mouth draws out the cursed splinter of flax that had been lodged beneath her nail for so long. The moment the splinter is removed, Talia stirs. Her eyes flutter open. She takes a breath, a conscious breath, for the first time in nearly a year. She awakens from a long, dark dream, not to the face of a loving prince, but to the sight of 2 infants she does not recognize, the children of her own violation. This is the reality of the original tale. The awakening is not a release from a curse, but the discovery of its horrific consequences. She is alive, yes, but she is a mother, a victim, and utterly alone in a decaying palace with 2 children whose father is a ghost, a phantom assailant. She names them Sole and Luna, sun and moon. To truly grasp the horror of this, you must understand the world that produced it. 17th century Europe was not a world that recognized consent in the way we do today. For the powerful, especially for kings and nobles, the bodies of others, particularly women of lower status, were often seen as property available for their use. A king's desire was tantamount to law. What Basil is describing is not a fantastical evil. He is describing a mundane, terrifying reality of the abuse of power. The king in the story is not a monster, he is simply a king, acting as kings did. His crime is shocking to us, but to a contemporary audience, it might have been seen as a regrettable but unsurprising exercise of noble privilege. The story is not judging him, it is merely stating what happened. This clinical, matter-of-fact tone is precisely what makes it so chilling. Furthermore, the medical reality of the time was steeped in uncertainty. Conditions like comas, catalepsy, or even deep fainting spells were poorly understood. The line between life and death was blurry and terrifying. The fear of being buried alive was so prevalent that safety coffins were designed with bells and breathing tubes. Talia's state, this sleeping death, taps directly into this primal fear of being trapped within one's own body, helpless, a spectator to one's own violation. Her awakening is not a moment of joy, it is a moment of profound confusion and trauma. She is a woman out of time, a mother with no memory of conception, a victim with no knowledge of her attacker. The story has just begun, and already it has veered into a territory of psychological horror that the later sanitized versions would never dare to tread. Back in his own kingdom, the king, the rapist, eventually remembers the woman in the woods. Basil writes that after some time, the memory of Talia pricked him. It is a casual, passing thought. He decides to go on another hunting trip. He returns to the abandoned palace, expecting to find the beautiful corpse he had left behind. Instead, he finds a living woman. He finds Talia awake, and beside her he finds 2 beautiful children, his children. What is his reaction? Guilt? Remorse? Horror at his own past actions? No. He is overjoyed. He is delighted by the children, sun and moon. He spends several days with Talia and his new secret family. He feels no shame. His act of violence has produced a beautiful outcome: 2 heirs. In the cold calculus of dynastic power, this is a success. He bonds with Talia, forms a connection with her, and for a moment, a twisted version of a happy family emerges from the ashes of his crime. But the king has a life he must return to. He has a kingdom to rule, and he has a wife. He leaves Talia once again, promising to return for her and the children soon. But he makes a critical mistake. In his sleep, consumed by his new secret, he begins to talk. He murmurs their names: Talia, sun, moon, and his wife, the queen, hears him. Here, the story introduces its true antagonist. She is not a wicked fairy acting on an ancient grudge. She is a woman, a queen, whose husband has not only been unfaithful, but has created a secret, illegitimate family. Her position, her honor, and the legitimacy of her own line are all threatened. Her rage is not magical, it is deeply, terrifyingly human. Consumed by jealousy and a thirst for vengeance, the queen acts. She uses the king's own secretary, bribing and threatening him to learn the truth. The secretary, loyal to power and coin, tells her everything. He gives her the location of the remote palace, and he describes Talia and the 2 children. The queen's revenge is not swift. It is meticulous, psychological, and utterly monstrous. She sends the secretary to Talia with a message purporting to be from the king, summoning his children to the palace because he misses them. Talia, trusting the man who says he comes from the king she now loves, sends her children, sun and moon, into the serpent's den. When the children arrive at the royal court, the queen gives her first horrific order. She summons the royal cook. "Take these 2 children," she commands, "and kill them. Then cook them into several savoury pastries and sauces. I want to serve them to their treacherous father for dinner." This is the second gut-punch revelation of Basil's tale. The story has now plunged headlong into the realm of forced cannibalism, one of the most ancient and visceral taboos in human storytelling. The queen's goal is not just to eliminate her rivals, it is to defile her husband in the most profound way imaginable, to make him a cannibal, a consumer of his own flesh and blood. But, as is common in these brutal folk tales, there is a single point of compassion in the darkness: the cook. He looks at the 2 beautiful children and is overcome with pity. He cannot bring himself to commit such an atrocity. So he takes them home, hides them with his own wife, and instead butchers 2 young lambs. He prepares the meat with exquisite care, crafting the elaborate dishes the queen demanded. That evening, the king dines at the royal table. The queen watches him, her face a mask of cold fury. As the king eats, savouring the meal, he comments on how delicious it is. "Of course it is," the queen hisses at him, her voice dripping with venom. "You are eating what is your own." The king, ignorant of her meaning, pays her no mind. He continues to eat, unknowingly consuming what he believes to be his own children, while their true murderer watches him with triumphant hatred. The psychological cruelty of this scene is breathtaking. It is a moment of pure, distilled evil, born not of magic, but of human jealousy and rage. But the queen's vengeance is not complete. With the children presumably dealt with, she turns her attention to her primary rival, Talia. She sends for Talia next, again under the false pretense that the king is waiting for her. Talia, eager to be reunited with her children and the man she now considers her husband, arrives at the palace. The moment she enters, she is seized by the queen's guards. The queen confronts her. "Welcome, you wicked slut," she says. "You are the weed who has given me such trouble, and now you have come to pay the price." She orders a massive pyre to be built in the castle courtyard. She tells Talia that she will be burned alive, but first she will be humiliated. The queen commands Talia to strip off her fine clothes, the rich brocades the king had given her. It is a symbolic stripping of her identity, her status, and her dignity before she is thrown to the flames. Talia, weeping and terrified, begs for her life. She protests that she is not to blame, that she was the victim of the king's power. As she strips off each layer of clothing, her robe, her gown, her petticoats, she utters a piercing scream, and this time, someone hears. The king, returning from another hunt, hears the screams echoing across the courtyard. He rushes to the scene and is met with an apocalyptic vision, a massive bonfire raging, and his wife, the queen, dragging a near-naked Talia toward it. He demands to know what is happening. The queen, caught in the act, unleashes her fury upon him, confessing everything. She tells him she has had his bastard children killed and served to him for dinner. She tells him she is now going to burn his whore. The king, finally understanding the depth of the horror, is staggered. In that moment of chaos, the cook, fearing for his own life now that the truth is out, throws himself at the king's feet. He confesses his own act of defiance. He tells the king that he disobeyed the queen, that sun and moon are alive and well, hidden in his own home. The king's relief is matched only by his rage. Justice in this story is as swift and brutal as the crimes that preceded it. The king makes no grand speech. He issues a single command. The queen, he orders, is to be thrown into the very fire she had prepared for Talia. He then turns to the secretary, the man who betrayed Talia and enabled the queen's plot. He too is to be cast into the flames. The pyre built for the victim consumes the perpetrators, and the cook, he is rewarded handsomely. He is made the king's royal chamberlain. The story then concludes. The king, having executed his wife, marries Talia, the woman he once raped. Sun and moon are brought forth, now recognised as the legitimate royal heirs. Basil ends the tale with a chillingly cheerful proverb. He who has luck on his side can go to bed, and fate will rain blessings on his head, happily ever after. Except it is anything but. The story's conclusion is perhaps its most disturbing element. The king, the catalyst for the entire tragedy, faces no consequences. His initial act of sexual violence is not only forgiven, but rewarded. He ends the story with a new wife, 2 beautiful children, and his power unchallenged. The narrative frames him as the ultimate victor, the dispenser of justice who cleanses his court and secures his lineage. Talia, the survivor of a coma, a rape, a postpartum awakening into confusion, and a near immolation, is simply absorbed into his world. Her trauma is the foundation of his new happiness. This is the raw, unvarnished source material, a story not about sleeping, but about being silenced. A story not about love, but about power. It reflects a world where a woman's body was a battlefield for dynastic conflict, and where a king's crimes could be laundered into a legitimate succession. So how did this brutal court drama, this chronicle of assault and cannibalism, become the gentle children's story we know today? The transformation was not accidental. It was a deliberate process of censorship and sanitization carried out by 2 key figures who would become the gatekeepers of the modern fairy tale. Our first agent of change is Charles Perrault. Let us move forward in time to the end of the 17th century, to the glittering, hyper-civilized court of the Sun King, Louis XIV, in France. Perrault was a man of this world. He was a high-ranking civil servant, a member of the prestigious Académie Française, and a leading intellectual of his day. He moved in the world of the salons, sophisticated gatherings of aristocrats who valued wit, elegance, and refinement above all else. In 1697, Perrault published his Histoire ou Contes du temps passé, or Stories from Past Times, with the subtitle Tales of Mother Goose. He took the rustic, often vulgar folk tales collected by writers like Basil and polished them, giving them a French aristocratic gloss. His goal was not to preserve the raw authenticity of the oral tradition. It was to make these stories suitable for his audience of powdered, perfumed ladies and gentlemen of the court. When Perrault got his hands on Sun, Moon, and Talia, he knew that a story involving necrophilia by a ruling monarch was simply not acceptable, even for the jaded French court. The central crime had to be erased. So Perrault performed the most significant act of narrative surgery in the story's history. He invented the kiss. In his version, which he titled La Belle au Bois Dormant, The Beauty in the Sleeping Wood, the prince, now a prince, not a king, arrives after 100 years. He finds the princess, and he does not assault her. He simply falls to his knees beside her. At that very moment, the enchantment comes to its end, and she awakens on her own. In later retellings of Perrault, this would morph into the idea that his arrival, or his kiss, is what breaks the spell. The act of sexual violence is replaced with a moment of fated, chaste romance. The perpetrator is transformed into a savior. This single change fundamentally alters the story's DNA. It shifts the narrative from one of female trauma to one of female passivity and romantic rescue. But Perrault, living in a world of court intrigue, did not discard the second half of Basil's story entirely. He kept the dark family drama, but he disguised it. In his version, the prince and the awakened princess marry in secret. He keeps her hidden at a country lodge for 2 years, where she gives birth to 2 children, a girl named L'aurore, dawn, and a boy named Le Jour, day, a clear echo of Basil's sun and moon. Why the secrecy? Because the prince's mother is still alive, and Perrault tells us she is an ogress. This is a crucial substitution. Basil's villain was a human queen, driven by a relatable, if monstrous, jealousy. Her actions were born of her threatened position as a wife and monarch. Perrault replaces this complex human antagonist with a literal fairy tale monster. The prince's mother has a natural, insatiable desire to eat human flesh, especially the flesh of young children. The understandable motive is replaced with a monstrous pathology. When the old king dies and the prince ascends to the throne, he brings his wife and children to the palace. Soon after, he must ride off to war. He leaves his family in the care of his ogress mother, the queen regent. The moment he is gone, the ogress queen orders her daughter-in-law and grandchildren move to a remote lodge in the forest. Then, she summons her steward. Her command is chillingly familiar. "I wish to eat little Dawn for my dinner tomorrow," she says, served with a sauce robert. Like in Basil's tale, the steward is compassionate. He cannot kill the child. He instead slaughters a lamb and serves it to the ogress queen, who devours it, believing it to be her own granddaughter. A week later, she demands the boy, Little Day. The steward substitutes a young goat. The queen eats him too. Finally, the ogress demands the young queen herself. She orders the steward to kill her and prepare her with the same sauce. But this time, she plans to visit the lodge herself to ensure the deed is done. The steward, desperate, reveals the truth to the young queen and hides her and her children in a secret room. He prepares a hind, a female deer, to fool the ogress, but the plan goes wrong. The ogress queen, prowling the castle, hears the sounds of the children from their hiding place. She hears the little boy crying and the little girl pleading. She realizes she has been tricked. In a terrifying rage, she orders a massive vat to be brought into the courtyard. She commands it to be filled with vipers, toads, and all manner of venomous serpents. Her plan is to throw the young queen, her children, the steward, and his entire family into this writhing pit of death. The execution is about to take place when, just as in Basil's version, the king returns unexpectedly. He rides into the courtyard and demands to know the meaning of the hideous spectacle before him. The ogress queen, seeing her son, her plot exposed, is seized by a final monstrous fury. She turns and throws herself headfirst into the vat of snakes, where she is instantly devoured. The king, Perrault notes, was sorry, for she was his mother, but he soon consoled himself with his beautiful wife and children. Perrault's version, while still shockingly grim with its cannibalistic ogress, has performed a critical sanitization. The story is no longer about the crimes of men and the vengeful fury of women. The male protagonist is now a blameless romantic hero. The villain is no longer a human being, but a supernatural monster. The story has been moved one crucial step away from reality and one step closer to fantasy. But the final, most thorough act of sanitization was yet to come. For that, we must travel to early 19th century Germany, to the world of Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. The brothers Grimm were not courtiers writing for aristocrats. They were academics, philologists, and cultural nationalists. They began their work during the Napoleonic Wars, a time when Germany was fragmented and often under French domination. Their project was to collect and preserve what they believed to be authentic German folk tales, to define a unique German cultural identity, a Volksgeist, or spirit of the people. However, their mission was not purely academic. As their collection grew in popularity, they began to see its commercial and pedagogical potential. They were heavily influenced by a rising bourgeois sensibility, one that valued piety, domesticity, and clear moral lessons for children. Their tales, they decided, should be suitable for the nursery, so they began to edit, and edit, and edit. Across the various editions of their Kinder- und Hausmärchen, children's and household tales, the Grimms systematically stripped the stories of their most violent and sexually suggestive content. Incestuous fathers were changed into evil step-uncles. Pregnancy out of wedlock was erased, and when they came to the story of Sleeping Beauty, which they called Dornröschen, Little Briar Rose, they performed the most radical cleansing of all. First, they solidified Perrault's romantic invention. The kiss became the undisputed central magical act. The prince is guided by destiny, arrives at the exact moment the 100 years are up, and his kiss is the pure, fated antidote to the curse. The rape is now so deeply buried it is unthinkable, but their most significant change was what they chose to omit. The Grimms cut the story in half. The entire second act, the story of the secret children, the jealous rival, and the cannibalism plot, is completely excised. In the Grimm version, the story ends the moment the princess awakens. The kiss is the climax and the resolution. The final line is, "And they all lived happily ever after until their deaths." By doing this, the Grimms completed the transformation. The villain is now simplified to be only the wicked fairy from the beginning, the one who wasn't invited to the christening. Her motive is pure spite. The complex, dark drama of the royal family is gone. The monstrous ogress mother is gone. The attempted murder and cannibalism of the children are gone. The story is no longer a multi-generational saga of violence and survival. It is a simple, linear romance. The princess's role is reduced to absolute passivity. In Basil's tale, Talia survives, endures, and becomes the matriarch of a new dynasty. In the Grimm's tale, Briar Rose does nothing. She is cursed. She sleeps. She is awakened. She is an object, a prize to be won. Her entire existence is validated and activated by the arrival of a man. This is the version that the modern world, and most powerfully Walt Disney in 1959, would adopt and cement in the global consciousness. The sanitization was a process of deliberate ideological sculpting. Perrault, writing for the court, kept the intrigue but externalized the evil into a monster to avoid criticizing the aristocracy. The Grimms, writing for the emerging middle-class family, removed the intrigue entirely to create a simple moral lesson about patience and romantic destiny. Each step moved the story further from its origin as a brutal commentary on the abuse of power and the precariousness of a woman's life. Each edit erased more of Talia's trauma. The rape was replaced by a kiss. The terrifying, lonely birth was replaced by a gentle awakening. The cannibalistic mother-in-law was first turned into an ogress and then erased from the story altogether. What is left is a hollowed-out narrative, a beautiful shell, but the ghost of the original still haunts it. The enduring power of Sleeping Beauty does not come from the sanitized romance. It comes from the archetypal horror that lies dormant beneath the surface. The imagery of the story, the impenetrable forest of thorns, the silent castle where time has stopped, the woman suspended in a death-like state, is profoundly unsettling. It speaks to a deep, primal fear of being trapped, silenced, and violated. The Forest of Thorns is not just a magical barrier, it is a metaphor for the isolation of trauma. The silent castle is the landscape of a mind locked away from the world, and the sleeping princess is a potent symbol for every person whose voice has been taken from them, whose body has been used without their consent, whose life has been put on hold by the actions of another. The story you know is a bedtime story. The original is a warning. It is a testament, written in the bloody ink of the 17th century, to a world where happily ever after was often just the beginning of a new nightmare. It tells us that the real monsters are not always the ones with magical powers, but the ones who wear crowns, the ones who sleep beside you, the ones whose crimes are forgotten the moment they are committed. Sleeping Beauty is not a story about a woman waiting for a man to give her a life. It is the story of a woman whose life is stolen by a man and her brutal, terrifying journey back from a living death. It is a narrative crime scene, meticulously cleaned and scrubbed by later generations who could not bear to look at the evidence of the original sin. They wanted you to believe the story ends with a gentle kiss that brings life, but the true story begins with a violent assault that creates it, and the happily ever after was never for the princess. It was for the man who violated her, a final, chilling monument to who gets to write the history books, whose pain is remembered, and whose suffering is simply erased for the comfort of children.